Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the boldness of presenting with radical storytelling, loud and clear, with Yamilet Kano. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a program manager at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you may have just seen in the chat, the Nasdaq Center, along with our partner Mentor, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Quick housekeeping, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, and BPM. We're grateful and humbled by their contributions. During these still unique times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs that we're working with. So I'm going to start by launching a quick poll to just let us know how you're feeling today. Are you optimistic? Are you just in survival mode, feeling a little anxiety or fear? We've been measuring this since the beginning of the pandemic, and also are hoping that by providing these free education and platforms and programs for you, that the sentiment will increase to the optimism category. But totally understand that there is just some survival mode and anxiety out there. I'm gonna end this poll quickly, share these results, but don't want to delay the awesome content that we have today. So for those of you in the negative feeling sentiment, hopefully our presentation will help alleviate some of those feelings. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guest, Yamilet Kano. She's the founder of Louder. Yamilet.
Hi, Colin.
So looking forward to having you. Good luck.
Thank you. And you know, Colin, it all started in slow motion. My ribs were so tight. My eyes were focused. My shoulders were back. And my arms were rounded, like holding a beach ball. I was there, ready. But still, a million thoughts were going through my head. I was thinking, what if I fall? What if I'm going too fast? What if I don't remember what to do? But just suddenly everything happened. Instinctively, my back leg just pulled up in retro position, and I was ready. I was thinking, just make sure you go up and not around. I just completed my first pirouette, which is one of ballet's most iconic moves. And I was already thinking right away, how could I complete a second, a third, a fourth, or a fifth pirouette? I was so excited about what just happened and the challenge that I achieved. Funny, isn't it, that when we go through something that is difficult or challenging and we're able to have closure and success, we are already moving forward and ready for the next step. It all started at a sunny day in Mexico City, driving through the bustling streets with my mom. That's part of the story of me as a ballerina. I did it for 20 wonderful years, and it's always going to stay with me. Hi, everyone. My name is Yamilet Cano, and I'm an artist, a ballerina, an entrepreneur, a woman, but a Latin woman that it's also trying to push boundaries in my industry. And a lot of people first ask me when they meet me, so how do you pronounce your name? Well, don't worry, it's not difficult. It sounds like an omelet, but with a J sound in the beginning. And I like to call myself the colorful and passionate megaphone. And what is that? Because I just simply like to speak up, tell my truth in a way that always people can communicate with me and we can resonate and create a connection. So that's my story. And today, I want to learn about yours. Thank you for being here with us today and listening to my ideas and my stories. We are going to learn some hacks, tricks, and tips on how to utilize the storytelling to our advantage, to build connections, to inspire people. And also, if you're an entrepreneur and you're always pitching your ideas, to make a difference, to stand out, and to be unique with our own natural strengths and uniqueness. So don't worry about it. We will be sharing. The center is very kind to be organizing this event. And I also want to share this information with you. So don't worry about writing everything down. But there are going to be 3 things we're going to learn today. And hopefully they're useful right away, or if not, in the future for you. What are we going to be doing? Well, first of all, we're going to understand why storytelling is so wonderful. Second, we're going to learn how to create content in the structured way, because storytelling is all about structure. And third, we're also going to learn how to utilize those emotions to create something that I call a star moment. In any moment, if there's a question or you want to stop me, please do so. I know we have the Q&A at the end, but I also like the sessions to be interactive. It's not only about me. It's also about, as I said, you. So how are we going to start? Well, we are going to talk about why storytelling. As you might know now, I started my introduction with a story that is so dear to mine. Because, as I said, I was a ballerina for 20 years. And this has made a great impact in my life. The way that I move, but also the way that I like to communicate. And in dancing, we're all about stories. So why stories are so important? Well, first of all, we know, and I'm going to go here in a circle and go down. We know that stories are very important because, first of all, they connect us. Since the beginning of time, we have been connected with stories. Remember in the past, our ancestors were gathered around in circles of fire, and would pass that information to others through stories. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, PowerPoint was only created a few years back, and stories have been created since the beginning of time. So why only rely on PowerPoint and information in bullet points if we know that our brain is wired to connect with stories? Second, I'm going to repeat myself, it creates a connection. Why? Because it has an emotional effect. And third, it allows us to put ourselves on the place of the other person. So it helps us to resonate with our audience. It's kind of, some people say that it's that empathy machine that helps us to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, to understand and see how they react when we're telling them the story. And stories helps us to make the audience a co-author, a co-pilot of what's happening. They react with their micro expressions. They react with their sound, like if we are happy, if we're sad, if we are surprised. So as a speaker, that also helps us to react back and forth with our audience. And then, as I was saying too, I'm gonna do it in full so you can see it. And I'm gonna go on this side, is that stories are the best ways for us to communicate as children and as elderly. And in these two cases, if we analyze it, is when we are the best at being ourselves. You will ask me, Jamilet, but how? Well, when we are kids and when we are older, we have less consciousness of the social convention, which allows us to be free, to be more vulnerable, to be more transparent. So that's why when you see a kid, they recount what's happening to them in the storytelling way. And obviously our elders, they love to tell us stories, and we love listening about their background, their history, their experience through stories. So why in adulthood we don't use stories that much? We tend to think that stories are not that powerful in adulthood, that they don't serve us that much. But you know what? One of the reasons we don't use storytelling when we are adults is more because of this consciousness, this social convention idea that we have about ourselves. We are more of a critic. And you may know that the worst critic is oneself. So let's think about this information, that when we are kids and we are elders, we are showing the best version of ourselves. So why don't we do it when you're adults? So this would be one of the things. It all starts with you. And I always say this, I can give you all the bells and whistles. I can show you all the tools and the information. But if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have that confidence about what you have and what you need to work on, then it's not going to be an interesting, impactful story for you. So we should use stories more in an adulthood time, because that's when we are being the best at ourselves. And the other thing, as I said before, stories are great because we can release the good feeling hormones. And which are these hormones? And a lot of you may already know, but there's 3 of these hormones that are released when someone tells us a story. And the first one is dopamine. And dopamine is when someone tells you a surprising story or something that has a cliffhanger, you start feeling that excitement. So there's also a way for us to control how people are going to feel and their emotions depending on the stories that we tell and the structure that we give to those stories. So make sure that if you want someone to feel that excitement, to utilize sentences or a structure that we use a cliffhanger or suspense. Remember in my story about my first pirouette, I was telling you that I was there. I was already thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you may already be thinking and having an image of myself trying to do a pirouette. For those who know dance or perhaps ballet, you've already noted, oh yeah, she's a ballerina. But for those who doesn't know about ballet, maybe you were thinking, what is she talking about? What is this going to be the result? So you already had that little suspense. You added with voice and pause, cadence, and other things, but the structure of the story perhaps already delivers some dopamine. The second good feel hormone is oxytocin. And this one is when we want to create empathy. When we want to connect with someone at the more personal level. We don't have to disclose all of our information. You don't have to tell your friends about everything in your life. But if you want someone to feel that empathy, we need to create stories that are surrounded a little bit more into, I would say, a message that would showcase a challenge. It doesn't have to be sad all the time, but it helps that you are vulnerable and authentic. That's the other thing. As I said in the beginning, it all starts with you. If we are not authentic, it's just only going to sound and look like you're playing a persona that it doesn't equate to your real self. So if we want someone to feel for us, we can utilize this story for releasing oxytocin. And I'm sure all of us, we have those stories where we say, you know what? It was that difficult time. After I finished my pirouette, I was already thinking about all of these possibilities of a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth pirouette. But I was going around in circles like today. I didn't know what to do. And I practiced and practiced and practiced till my toes were bleeding. I had blisters. And even with all that practice, I didn't make it. It took me around 6 months to complete my second pirouette. So that's as an example of a story that can help you release oxytocin. Because you're feeling for me, oh my God, she's bleeding, her toes are bleeding, and which is actual effect with ballerinas or any dancer. You know, you have to endure all of this physical constraints. So you can use stories that are not that dramatic. We're all going through a difficult times now. As Colin pulled up with the poll, we're all optimistic, most of us optimistic, but there's still some fear, there's some anxiety. So why don't we share these stories to connect on a different level with people? And because storytelling is helping us to connect, it will help us to create long-lasting relationships, which in business, it's very important. Especially in difficult times, you want to have those bonds with people that trust you and that you trust, so business can move forward. And as we know, we have our next hormone, which is the endorphins. And this one is quite easy to release when we're telling a story. If you consider yourself a little bit more humorous or funny, we can utilize these to release endorphins. You don't have to be a comedian. To be fair, I've never thought of myself as being super funny. And most of the stories that I tell are more about that emotional battle or the artistic side, but still there could be some fun parts about it. So if you want to release endorphins with your audience, you can utilize some fun elements, a joke, or just say, for example, for me, sometimes it happens that perhaps I mispronounce something or my enunciation is not super crisp. So I just say, well, yeah, it's my Mexican accent. I can make fun of myself, right? Because I'm from Mexico and perhaps my accent sometimes makes me stumble. So I can make fun of that. So the easiest way to start utilizing comedy in our stories is first using our own experience. And then you might try to want to wonder and make fun of other situations or other people. But for that, you do need a little bit more practice. So that's why stories are so important. Because first of all, they connect us. Second, they release these very feel-good hormones. And last, because it helps us be understanding of our audience and learn more about them. So you might be asking now, okay, that's great. I want to use stories. Why not? But how do I start? Well, first of all, we need to note that we all have stories to tell because you all have experiences, right? Every day we are living certain things that happen to us. And we might think that they're not important, perhaps they're not relevant. But because they're happening to us, that's why we don't give the right weight to those stories. But if we want to see the potential of those stories, I would suggest for you to start writing a list of those anecdotes or experiences that you know that have a solution at the end or a lesson that helps you or somebody else move forward. So that's the best way to start collecting, let's say, your Netflix of stories. You want to have that discography of stories. And from there, you start choosing and selecting the ones that you feel most comfortable with, and you start developing those stories. You don't have to develop 20 stories at once. I know it will be very daunting. And if you have to do that, I will feel like this, have to be crying. But you can start with 1 or 2 stories. As I said, for myself, and I'm going to give you, most of the examples are about myself and not because I want that to be the center of attention, is because, as I say, it all starts with you. And if we know ourselves, if we learn about what works for ourselves, then it's easier to transfer that information for others with teams or people that we work with. I always use my ballerina story. This is one of the stories that I'm so comfortable because I danced for 20 years. And even if I forget, let's say, the script, I always have something to say because there were 20 years of experiences around this specific story of ballet. I also have in my top 10 list of stories that I can use is the fact that I'm Mexican. And you know what? Nobody's going to contest that, even of another Mexican, because they all have different experiences and different backgrounds. So you can always create that little cocktail, I like to call it. You put all of your spices and your ingredients together and you shake it the way you want it. So, for example, those are the top stories that I like sharing with people when I meet. Another one would be about my name. And that's why I also throw into the equation the fact that my name perhaps could be difficult to pronounce. So I added some story elements to make it a little bit more fun, comparing it with an omelette and saying to people that it sounds like a J, but not. So you see, already you might be thinking, I do have this story. So now what happens when you got the stories? Well, you have to give a structure. I'm going to make this one big. And again, I'm going to transform myself to the other side. So you can see, I like to compare stories with problem solving. And why problem solving? There's a lot of different ways to see and visualize storytelling. And a lot of you may already know, for example, there's Nancy Duarte's over the spark line, which is the modern spark line of reviewing a speech and storytelling, which looks a little bit like a staircase, but horizontal staircase that goes like this, up and down, up and down. We have the Shakespearean way of seeing stories with 1 act, 2 acts, 3 acts, 20 acts, if you want. And there's other ways of looking at the story more so as a wave. But I really like this way of looking at a story as a circle or a loop, that the beginning and the end are connected. And it all has to go through a process, but at the end of it, beginning and end, they have to make sense. If they don't have that connection, then the story doesn't flow and the story has no positive resolution, even though the solution might have been not positive. But as humans, we want to know that at the end of the day, we have a solution, good or bad, but there's something of closure. I told you, remember at the beginning, we want to have that closure to move forward. So when we're thinking about business and to encourage you to think more about using storytelling for business, I'm not only thinking about it as a fairy tale recount, because that's one of the big things that people do ask me. You know, Jamilette, I think that if I use storytelling, I'm going to have to start with once upon a time in a far, far away land, which that's nice. But nobody's going to take you seriously if you do that out of context. So with business storytelling, we first of all don't have to start with once upon a time. But if we see it as a problem-solving solution, then we will be more open to utilize the structure of storytelling to present our messages. So when we have a problem, what happens? We state that problem, we explore the problem, we have to pull the insights, and then we find a solution. So it's the same thing with this loop. If you say we have a problem and we have that problem has to have a solution at the end, right? So we go full circle. So as you see, we can have the challenge first, which is you or something. It doesn't have to be you, the protagonist. It could be that challenge or problem that you're facing. Something is not right, so we have to change it. So in order to achieve change and transformation, we have to go through a process of uncertainty. If we didn't have that process of crossing the threshold into chaos or uncertainty, we would not have change. So if there's no need for a solution, well, we're not going to push those boundaries. So when we face something challenging, we do need to find that closure. Hence, we go and find the chaos, all the alternatives, you know, when we are in that threshold of what do I do now? What do I have to do? And how am I going to use this for my advantage, the team's advantage, or to create positive change? Well, from all of those trails that you find, which is your search, you have to pick one. And when you pick one, then you understand that, you master it, and you take it back home and you implement. So that solution, that challenge that you have in the beginning goes back to a solution at the end. And this loop can go zoop, close, and then another loop, and then another loop. So they can be interconnected. It doesn't have to be one. But this is the beauty about visualizing storytelling as a loop and as a problem-solving option for your challenges. So when we have this visual about how storytelling can look like, what do I need to have in my structure for it to make sense? Well, first of all, we need a hook. We need something that's going to captivate the attention of your audience. And by hook, again, I do not mean that you're going to start saying, once upon a time, let me tell you a story. Because then that's when people already going to be reactive at, I'm not sure if I want this, kiddie stuff. No, you don't have to start like that. You can start simple. It's very important to be simple. And you can start with sentences like, this reminds me when, something very important. I learned so much from my 3-year-old niece because I was going through this idea, blah, 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 blah. I said, thank you, Colin. And you know what? Everything started in slow motion. I didn't tell you, oh, I'm going to tell you my story of dancing. That's already very bullet pointy. You know what? My name is Jamilette. I'm going to tell you my story about dancing because I danced 20 years. And now I'm a public speaker, professional coach. Again, I'm just regurgitating my CV, which you can find online. You can go to my LinkedIn. All of that's available. But you want to listen and hear things that perhaps you might not find online. So that was my way of hooking you and start my story. So it's very important to have a hook. And you should find that way that works for you in terms of how do you want to deliver. Second, we need context. Why context? Well, if we don't give at least a time and place, a place, where this happens, most people may question, is this really a real story? Did you really experience these? Did it really happen? Well, if you give context, this would give better weight to your story and would also help your audience visualize the story better. Remember, we want our audience to be co-authors with ourselves for the story. So how do you make them co-authors? Is by creating a visual image, a mental image of what you're going through. So when I said it all started in Mexico City, for those who have been to Mexico City, you might already be thinking, smelling, or experiencing Mexico City. For those who've never been to Mexico City, maybe you're already thinking, oh, an exotic place far away from home or not very far away from home. So you see, you're already being part of the story because I gave you context. I didn't tell you when, the year, but I could have said in 1980 something. I don't even remember when it was. It was a while ago. But you could say in 1994, or you can say in my early 20s. So you're giving context. Helps your audience develop a better mental visual idea of what's happening. Then what comes next? Okay, I already have a hook. I give them a context. Well, we need to have a challenge. And this challenge is that problem that you want to solve, or that issue that you've been thinking about, or a theory you just want to prove. You have a thesis. And not always. By challenge, I don't mean that it has to be negative. Remember, it could be also an idea that is a positive idea that you have, but you want to prove it. So you have to have a challenge. And this challenge is, again, what's the problem or the opportunity? And the fourth thing would be the conflict. And conflict, again, doesn't have to be negative. Is when you already pinpoint that challenge, what am I going to do about it? This is very simple. Am I going to do something about it, or am I just going to let it go? Do I have 4 paths and I have to choose 1 or 2? Do I need help for this? So what am I going to do about the issue in front of me? And it's very important in the storytelling to not leave aside the struggles or the details about the struggles. Why? Because here is where you can create the empathy level we were talking about, releasing that oxytocin. If I don't tell you how hard it was or how tangled in my head it was for me to do that first pirouette, for those who don't know about dancing, you might think, easy, to just go around in circles. But for those who do know the struggle, they relate. So I'm already missing perhaps half of my audience without talking about those things that were going around my head. So without being over dramatic, you do need to state some kind of the process that you went through with that conflict. And we need a solution. So we're already going that chaos, we have the conflict, we decide what we're going to do about it. Now we're taking it home. We need a solution. This is one of the key elements in storytelling. There's a quote saying that if you have a bad beginning and a bad ending, then you don't have a good story. Why is this? If I don't hook people, then I'm already set up for failure. But if I don't give my audience a solution, then I leave them hanging and thinking for themselves. And this is not because we should not let people get their own solutions or their own ideas. It's because by human nature, we do not like to be feeling the void, the unexpected, right? These past 2 years, we've all been feeling this, what's going to happen? When is this going to be over? So that's what's creating the anxiety. So if you want people to feel more at ease, even if you are sharing bad news, you need to give them some kind of solution. whether, again, I said it be good or bad, you want them to have closure. We all experience this fear and anxiety when we don't have the closure. So this part is super important. We should not skip it. And then we can share a lesson or not. I must say that perhaps this part, not all the stories need to have it. You don't have to teach a lesson all the time. But if you have a lesson and you want to, it's good to share, this was the solution and I learned, or we learned. In the team, we understood that the budgeting challenges were because of ABC. And this moment is where you perhaps want to be a little bit more bullet pointy, to conclude and to say what we learned today are 1, 2, 3. You can still close the story without having to be that direct, but leaving people with that feeling of inspiration. So you may or may not have a lesson. If you decide to have a lesson, you can also have something called the action or a call for action. What do you want people to do with what they learn? Do you want them to buy now, all this sales pitch and stuff, give me 20% of the company valuation and I'm going to do this for you. So you can ask for something in the action. But again, it doesn't have to always be there. Not all the stories need this. It's for you to assess with your audience if you need it. And my curveball will be, guess what? All of these things can be changed. This is important to, those questions that I just gave you for the elements of the story are important to be answered in your story when you are structuring it. But you need to be flexible. You need to understand that, as I said, not all stories need all of the elements. They need the certain ones that I mentioned. They do need a beginning and they do need an ending. And we need to showcase the process in some way. But you can start with your ending and then go on and finish with your beginning. You can mix it up. It doesn't always have to be A, B, C, D, E. This is where the fun comes. You can be flexible, you can adapt it, depending on your audience and depending on what you want to achieve. And I'm gonna repeat myself. It all starts with you. Because if you don't know what you want to deliver, how do you want to deliver, which is the emotion do you want to imprint in your audience, then there's nothing you can do, even with all the bells and whistles, all the hacks and the tips about using storytelling. So I would encourage you to learn about yourself, what makes you tick, what makes you shine, what are your strengths and your weaknesses, and how can you use them to your advantage? Because then it would be more transparent and authentic. And going through that, I want to see how can we shine? How can we shine with the story? How can I make an impact? Well, when we are delivering content online, now we have all these tech tools and softwares and things we can use, videos and images, and that makes it a little bit more exciting. Like I'm using this app, it's super cool. If you have not heard about it, it's called I'm sure Isis or Colin will be sharing some information about it. You can utilize it to have your slides like a TV presentation, and even has some cool features. You see, it can be green and match my slide. Could be used as talking about my mood today. Oh, yeah, I'm feeling so green. Or I can go build mode, or that, just go normal. But the only way to leave something behind that it's unexpected and unique is by understanding how can you use it, utilizing what you have in your hands, like technology perhaps. If you're doing it live, well, there's other things, but we need to understand how do we feel very comfortable doing it. So these are my tips to deliver something called the star moment, which is something they would always remember. We want to deliver something that people would always remember in your presentation. Whether it be with, as I said already, a video, would be some special effects, special sound effects, maybe a play, you want to do role play, maybe you just want to turn off the lights and show a film. You choose. Another way to deliver a start moment is by utilizing different kind of pitch, tone, and cadence throughout your presentation. So don't be afraid to utilize your different tones. We all have different tones. We can all go high, we can all go low. It's all about the practice. So play with your voice, play with your pitch, and especially play with that cadence, because we are afraid of silence most of the time. But it's a great way to build momentum and suspense. It's a great way to make people think about what you're asking. So if you're asking a question, ask the question and stop. Let them think. Don't be afraid of that. And also, you know what? Quick tip, it's a great way to stop using fillers. We all have fillers, you know, the ams and the hms and all that. If you pause, you think, then you might be not using those fillers. The other way to deliver something that we'll always remember is with your body language. And this was a question addressed by our attendees beforehand, which is, I love using my hands and I speak with my hands and my body. Is that too much? Well, I would have to say, again, it depends on you. It depends how comfortable you feel. If you don't feel very comfortable using your hands and suddenly you start doing this and talking like this, obviously it's going to be uncomfortable for the audience. Obviously it's going to be too much. You have to find that sweet spot and balance. I like to call it your ideal frequency. It's like music. You have the music line and it can go up and down depending on the tune, right? Not all music is always high, 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 or always down, down, down. You need to find a flow. It's that melody, your rhythm and rhyme. To practice in front of the mirror using your body language. And the other thing that body language needs to do is to help support all of your communication tracks. I'm supporting my voice, my speech, my vocal speech with my body language. If I use my body language without a technique or a structure, then it would look silly. Imagine I say to you today, I'm going to give you 3 tips. You're going to be what? You say 3, you show me 5. See, that doesn't really make sense. So if you're going to say 3 tips, make sure you use your body language accordingly. I'm going to teach you such a great idea. That looks small. Again, you need to equate it to what you're saying. And also you need to move. Online is very difficult to be moving around because, for example, myself, if I do this, you miss me. If I do that, again, I'm disappearing. So you have to be aware of your frame. But a way to move online is to do it more back and forth. Don't be afraid of that. Why? Because the online is a 2D medium. So if you don't use that to create a 3D exposure, then you're going to look very flat. When we're doing it live, it's easier. Don't be afraid to use your space, to move a little bit, to use your head up, down, you know, sideways, more than only your hands, also your whole body. Don't walk around like a crazy lion, but use it in a moderate way. And well, we need stature. We need to stand up and have a good posture, but with stature. What do I mean by stature? It's that little extra that makes you look so tall. And how do we know we can do this? Well, you need to practice with your breath, your diaphragm, and try to look a little bit taller than you are. I'm standing straight here. I have stature here. I'm standing straight. Stature. Okay. So those are the things that will help you deliver a star moment. And also, to deliver a start moment, you have to give the right emotion. So we're going to go back to what we talk about, those feeling good hormones, endorphin, oxytocin, and you have to understand what do you want people to feel to create a structure according to that. So if you choose dopamine, well, you know that you have to create those cliffhangers. If you choose endorphin, you need to add something funny. So by controlling what you want people to feel, then your stories are going to be more impactful. So remember that the emotional approach of storytelling is super important, because if you don't make people feel anything, again, you're just delivering bullet points that would increase the stress, the anxiety, the boredom, and the lack of interest from your audience. So now that we know, again, why storytelling is so important, how can we visualize it? And then which elements do we need to have in order for the story to be successful? And how to deliver something meaningful and unique? I'm going to answer the question you might be thinking, or not, but the title of this workshop is being Radical Storytelling. Well, I'm saying, what is radical storytelling? Well, radical storytelling has just one answer, and I'm going to give that to you here. The key word is practice. We all have good stories. I said that in the beginning. We all have great stories, but without an intention, without the emotion, and without the structure, a great story can be just a recount of information. Having a good story is not enough. Practicing storytelling and practicing good intentions, practicing using the emotions to our advantage, practicing creating good structures is what makes radical storytelling possible. So it's one step forward than just having it, but it's utilizing it to create an effect, to inspire, and perhaps move mountains. So you need all these elements if you want to call yourself a radical storyteller. Those that really practice using all of the elements of storytelling in your life. And that's simple. Really is as simple as that. So what will be my conclusion? Well, my conclusion would be, again, as I was saying, that you need to find yourself. What are your strengths? What are those weaknesses that we want to pass? How can I feel better with my confidence being high and utilizing the structure that you learned today? And how can I surprise people by using a star moment with my storytelling structure? Well, it's all in the end. It's all in the way that we use it. It's all how confident we feel. Because life is always going to leave scars. We're going always to have those falls. And from time to time, perhaps break one toe or the other. But that doesn't mean that this is the end for us or that we should not even try it. The opposite. All of those scars, all of those challenges and falls, there are more opportunities for us to live a more meaningful life. And these are our building blocks. These are steps and part of our journey. If your point shoes, there's a say, if your point shoes are neat and clean and perfect, that means that perhaps you haven't had the confidence to be properly communicating, be open with motion, emotion, and impact, be vulnerable, be expressive, and be emotional. And with all of the falls, for every one of those falls, my broken toes, each of the nails that they have to pull out, the essential has always to go back again and understand the process, to give a smile, to breathe and take the time to express that artsy personality, that idea and that creativity. Because life is like a dance, life is like ballet. It is not easy. Sometimes it may be too hard, but it never stops to be beautiful. So I want to thank you and hope that you had a good time. That's it for me. You will get all this information again with all my contacts. What I was sharing with you, I'm so proud to, again, share. It's a subtract of my book with 23 other wonderful women that share their stories about resilience and transformation at Sunstance. You can, if you like, just go and grab it in Amazon. It's there for you to read. You learn a lot from all the stories and how people share their own stories in a storytelling structure. And I want to thank you again. Remember, it all starts with you and the way that you want the world to see your idea. Thank you.
Love it. Jamila, thank you so much. Amazing presentation. Hopefully everyone's presentations just got 10x better. Before we jump into Q&A, because I know we have a lot of great questions and we'll try to get to them all, I'm going to put up a quick poll. So last month, you asked us for marketing and presentation. Now we're hosting it. Now, what do you want to hear in the next couple months? So just give us a shout out in that poll and we'll use this information to help you overcome your challenges. All righty, I'm gonna end that poll, share those quick results. Looks like marketing's still there, so we'll continue to do that, but the big scattering. Okay, Jamilet, let's jump right into it. A recent case study found that the average human attention span has fallen from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. How do you keep someone's attention and make sure your story is not boring? Do you use hand gestures or facial expressions to keep their attention?
All of the above. As I just said, use all of those strengths to your advantage. If, again, you're not such at ease by using your body language, just try small. Start with small things. You don't have to overdo it, because if you do overdo it, people are going to know. They're going to know that you're not being authentic. If you've never seen me move and then suddenly, again, as I said, I start doing all these funny things, you're going to be like, what happened? What did she drink? I want one of those. So practice in front of the mirror. Remember, the key word is practice. Don't be afraid. Ask your friends for feedback. It's very important to know that feedback, because we all have two parts of the coin, right? We have our own vision and our own idea of ourselves. And what about what the world thinks? It doesn't mean that that's going to determine you, but it does make a difference to understand what other people think for you to craft and create a better self. If everybody thinks that I'm not funny and I keep telling those bad jokes, then I'm not helping myself. So if you ask for feedback and then I understand that people don't find me funny, then I will work on my jokes. So don't be afraid to ask and practice.
Great advice. All right. How do you tell a story in an email?
This is the same thing what I just said. You write down all of those ideas. You make a list of the stories or the thing that you want to communicate. You need to answer those questions of the structure. Not all the emails have to have a lesson or an action. But if you decide, you need to understand where do they land. And then from there, you start writing the content that needs to have a flow. It needs to be connected. Again, don't do bullet points. We are all bored about bullet points. You want to be direct. It doesn't have to be a 20-page email. It can be just a one paragraph. But still, if it answers all of those questions, and you know that people, even by reading it, are going to feel something, then you have succeeded. How do they feel by reading? Because they're not looking at you, they're not listening to your tone of voice. Well, by picking the right words. So if you really want to make them understand the urgency, use words that are of urgency. If you want them to know that something is super important for you, use words that are over the top, like perhaps wonderful or I love doing this instead of I like. So then when people read, they can understand that that's super important for you, not just neutral. So don't be afraid of exploring vocabulary and using more colorful, I like to call it colorful words.
I love it. There's a couple questions here on the length of the story. So any advice around that?
Again, I will go back to your audience. How attentive is your audience going to be, and what do they really need to know? If you know that perhaps you're talking to your boss or the senior management, or you're pitching, you perhaps want to include a little bit more detail than the general, because your detail is going to help you get that yes. If you're talking to general public, maybe they don't want to know those details. If you're just doing a general presentation and you say, and I heard this before from another presenter saying, I love my dog. If you say that, most people can relate. Oh, dogs or cats, even if you have a cat or a fish. But you don't have to say, I love my dog because he licks me every morning when I wake up. And then when I give him food, da 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 da. Okay, I understand you love your dog. He's your best friend. So think about how would you react to those details if you were to be the person you're presenting to, and then start deleting those extra things that you may not need or start adding accordingly. If you're pitching and when you tell the pitch to yourself and it doesn't make sense, maybe you need more details.
That's great advice. All right, we're almost at time, but I'm trying to get to as many of those as possible. As somebody who speaks to customers in both Spanish and English, is the approach to storytelling used the same way in different languages?
Yes. It will be more again and the choices of words. If in Spanish, some words make more sense than in English, don't try to translate if you're fluent in both languages. If not, ask someone perhaps that is local to give you some insight for the things that really resonate. And also language is changing so much. There's so many words now that I didn't know, woke and clutch, and you just have to ask people that it's their mother tongue.
Yeah, I'm still not up to speed and I live in the States. Let's see. What does what you wear matter when you're telling a story / pitching?
Yes, everything. As I said, it's a whole package. And my analogy is always a book. If you see a book, how do you decide if you, or a cake, how do you decide if you're going to buy it or not? First of all, it's by the cover. Unfortunately, we do still have this thing with our society that we judge people by their cover. You don't have to be uber fancy. Again, it has to resonate with who you are and your personality. But it has to show that you made an effort. Cannot just walking with slippers and your pajamas, even if normally that's your personality. But when we are showcasing ourselves to the world, we should make an effort and even have those little details that start already creating a conversation. For example, we were just talking backstage before this presentation, and Isis mentioned, oh, you have purple. I see you constantly wearing purple. And I did say, yes, I like purple, but I have connected purple with the fact that we have the mentor makers movement and the purple color is the main color. So now when I'm presenting with you or anything doing around the mentor makers or Nasdaq, I try to make the effort to wear something purple.
Well, we appreciate that. And for some reason, because our space is blue, all of my shirts are blue. So I totally feel that.
You do need to feel comfortable to move too. If you're too stiff, yeah, it won't help you.
Awesome. That's great advice. Well, we're at time, but Jamilet, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom with our community. If there's one thing that you want our community to take away today with the boldness of presenting with radical storytelling, what would it be?
Don't be afraid, be bold. And to your level of boldness, again, it's not about copying someone else. If you admire someone and you want to be like that person, yes, it's important to work on those elements that you admire, but with your own stamp. And practice using storytelling so you can be a radical storyteller, not just have good stories. Practice using the emotion and practice having a structure and an intention. It's very important to have an intention.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And for everybody still on, thanks for joining us. We look forward to hosting you all in the future online, and hope you all have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks again, Jamilet.
Thank you. You can connect with me. You have other questions. I'm always happy to connect with everyone.
Great. Appreciate it. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Isis.